All right, so a slight adjustment to our sessions there. Originally, I think I had this in the afternoon. So this is actually our morning session. And no, I just realized it's not 8 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock. Here we go. Try that one more time. Okay, there we are. So there are our topics for this morning. So we'll take a few minutes here just to get to know everyone and see what the objectives are. And this will help us to sort of tweak the focus during these other parts here in our morning's session. So we, by the end of these 3 hours, we will have hopefully covered the basics of Onshape and also answered some specific questions that you may have about the CAD and how to teach it to your students and your teams and things like this. So please feel free to jump in. We have a small group this morning, and you're most welcome to just speak up and say, oh, at this point here, what would you do? Or can we cover this or speak about this? And let's make it a sort of a collaborative kind of session. So with that said, I see there are a few participants here. I'd just like to hear from everyone, as there are only a few of us, what your objectives with respect to Onshape may be, and that might help us to better understand each other and plan our time this morning. We'll start on my list. I see John is first on my list. John, might you share with us just a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and maybe some of your objectives with respect to getting to know Onshape?
All right, well, good morning. So I'm with Team 7690, Iron Works Robotics. We've been around since 2019. I have been with FIRST for a bit longer. We had a team previously that folded, but so with regards to CAD, I've had a few students, actually 3 students the last couple of years been working on CAD. I've used Onshape a little bit in terms of just looking at the drawings they've done, but I've left it to them to make all the changes. So I don't have a background in CAD at all. We had another teacher that taught that at the school. I'm a retired high school teacher. So I really just want to get an idea of how to make changes to drawings they have. So I know a little bit, but not a lot. So I'm really mostly starting from fundamentals here.
Great. Well, that's perfect, because that's exactly what this session is designed for. So great to meet you, John, and thank you very much. I see Eleanor is joining us this morning. Welcome, Eleanor. Maybe you might introduce yourself and then share with us your objectives for this session. What would you like to learn this morning? We're just not seeing Eleanor's audio unmute. I pressed the Ask to Unmute button. So if you can hear us, Eleanor, just let us know. You can chime in when your audio is working. We can maybe move on to Mike.
I'm Mike Varsava. I'm lead mentor for Team 7757. Mainly, I'd just like to learn more about how teams are integrating Onshape into their CAD activities.
Nice. Have you used Onshape in your team's efforts, Mike?
We used it a little bit last year, just because we were out of the workshop for the first couple of weeks. So we planned out lots of aspects of our robot, but it was really just a handful of students that were focused on it. So I'd like to learn a little bit more to bring that information to other students.
Nice. That's great. So hopefully we can explore that together and see how everything is going. I've heard from Peter, but I'd be very happy if Peter would introduce himself to our group.
Yeah, hi, my name is Peter. I'm from 7509 Brainstorm Robotics in Brantford. We sat out the last 2 years. We are participating in STEMLY Cup this fall and end of October. We took this year to rebuild. We lost pretty much all of our robotics team members to graduation during the COVID era, if you want to call it that. So very much a rebuild. we have been busy. We've got 3D printers, CNC routing equipment. We don't have necessarily the skills fully developed in all of these areas. We did start during COVID with Onshape, and I've got a pretty good understanding of what Onshape can do. Our kids can regularly design parts in isolation. Things that I want to get here is taking individual parts and putting them together in assemblies. So that's really the key skill area that I'm interested in developing.
Great. Well, thank you, Peter. As you see here, we'll get to a very basics of doing some assemblies today and explore that a little together in the last part of our session. And yeah, hopefully we can just explore this morning either an introduction to Onshape, or for those who already know Onshape, maybe a reflection on how do we share Onshape with new users and what's the best pedagogy, so to speak. So we can think of this session in terms of several approaches. We also have Stephen in our group this morning.
Good morning, William, and everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, William, for organizing all this. Thank you very much. And my name is Stephen from Team 8884. We are a relatively new team. We decided to join the FRC last December. And so what we did last season was we built the Everyboard, and we used Fusion 360 in our school. And I didn't use Onshape before. I used some other CAD, SolidWorks, and a few others, but I didn't use Onshape. And my student, they used Fusion 360 last season. So what we've done this coming month, actually in the last 1 month, they started looking at Onshape. One of the mentors offered to give them a few lessons on Onshape. And so I would also look at Onshape in the next 1 or 2 months, get a better idea. I heard a lot of good things about Onshape, and so that's why I want to attend this section, see if I can gain some advice how we can apply Onshape to our FRC in the coming year. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, great to have you here this morning, Stephen. And I'd also like to welcome Paul, who I sent on a wild goose chase to a wrong Zoom link this morning. So sorry, Paul. I don't know why it didn't copy the right way, but anyway, he was trying to get into another Zoom room and it didn't work. But now he's here with us, and Paul's a member of First Canada. Welcome, Paul. Maybe you can offer some introductions.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I think I know everybody from many years of working as a first senior mentor. I'm looking forward to learning stuff myself. I've always wanted to do some CAD, so getting to know some Onshape would be very helpful, especially working with new teams and encouraging them to do that. So thanks for doing this, William. I'm looking forward to it.
And just a little introduction here. My name is William and worked for 25 years in various international secondary schools. And I started out teaching physics and math and computers, but over the years, I sort of gravitated towards STEM and began combining them together. I started a project in China in 2012 where we designed and created a large industrial machine in China. That was kind of on my spare time while I was teaching classes there. And that's when I got into CAD. I started, well, in a pseudo or semi-CAD program, which was Google SketchUp. And that confused the engineers a lot when we brought our drawings to them. I didn't know about engineering then. But then through FRC, I got to do a lot more CAD and also summer STEM workshops doing 3D printing and sort of open source machine design and building. And so over the years, I've done a little bit of PTC Creo and a little bit of SolidWorks, but a lot of work in FreeCAD and Blender, which Blender is not quite a CAD program, though they are adding CAD functionality to Blender gradually. And more recently, I've, for the purpose of these sessions, I've been looking into Onshape. So I'm quite a new Onshape user. And so I know there are several experienced Onshape users here today. So I hope we can treat this as a session where we can all learn together. And I'm finding Onshape is quite an interesting program for a few reasons, and we can look at those right here. So we've had our introductions. I think it might be a good time to go on to why Onshape. And I'm finding in speaking with teams around the province, there is an uptake of Onshape. There may be a few reasons for this. I suspect that one is that Onshape is now sponsored for FRC teams. Well, that's great. I don't know when they started sponsoring it. It wasn't available when I started FRC, so maybe the last year or the year before, I think they started sponsoring Onshape. And that's one reason. But another reason, well, it's relatively easy to learn. I found the learning curve a little easier than some of the other CAD programs that I've seen. And the fact that it is online makes it very easy to install. I should have had another bullet point here. It's not only easy to learn, it's easy to install because you don't install it. It's just available online. So anyone with an internet connection, even a Chromebook, may be able to use Onshape. And so that's why Onshape is a very beneficial sort of CAD. It's much more accessible. You don't need a computer with lots of hard drive space and lots of processing power because you're only showing the final image, which is being cast over the internet. And then the really magical part for me that I'd love to explore with the community, it's much more collaborative because numerous people can work on a CAD document at the same time, just like in Google Documents. And so I think that's what's really intriguing for me about Onshape, this idea that it is collaborative. And I believe tomorrow evening, Ian McTavish, a member of our first community, will be offering a more advanced Onshape session. And we will look into how teams may collaborate and develop a workflow for designing robots in Onshape. So that's a little bit about why we may want to do Onshape.
So can I ask if
Sure.
allow us to work offline? Hello, if the internet is down, can we work? Or
And that is a drawback about Onshape. If your internet is down, you may have to patiently wait for it to get up again before you work on your Onshape. Now, the Onshape can, of course, export files, and you can download the files on your computer and maybe get it working on another computer that has the internet. Once you have another computer that's working on the internet, you can sign back into your account and continue working. Or you can choose to share it with someone else. But if the internet is down, your Onshape document will remain in the same state until you get back into it. So that is one possible drawback. So there's always a trade-off, I suppose, and there it is. And we hope for good internet for all.
Thanks.
So there we are. We will speak first a little bit about the Onshape interface, and please feel most free to continue jumping in as that adds richness to our discussion. And in any CAD program, one would be, of course, interested in finding out about the interface. And here are a few things that we can learn about the interface in Onshape. First of all, the files in Onshape are called documents. And what's really interesting for me as well, these documents can take on different versions. So for example, here's a part I was designing. It has it's a 3D printer part. I'm sort of designing a 3D printer and making pieces piece by piece. And let's say I'm working on this part and someone else is also working on this part, and each of us has to modify the parts in a slightly different way. Well, if you see on the left-hand side of the screen here, this is a versioning sort of interface for the part, and we can branch off the main version, each of the people who are working on this part, and make some modifications without interfering with the work of someone else. And this is much like the design and implementation of GitHub, which is a software package for collaboration over the internet involving versioning. And when I'm working on GitHub and I'm modifying a certain file, and someone else is working on a different branch, they can modify that same file without interfering with my work. And then we can review the changes, and we can even merge the changes to the same file in GitHub. I'm not so sure about that in Onshape yet, but we'll see how that all works. And then we can pull something back into the main branch and make it part of the main sort of current best version of our work. So there's a great feature of Onshape that's simply not available in some of the other CAD programs. I think about SolidWorks. It's a great program with numerous gigabytes of installation and licensing setup and all of this. And once you've got a SolidWorks document, you are working on it, and no one else really has access to it unless you share them over the internet. And then someone may modify one part and someone else also modify that part. And then you start to get confusion as to who has modified the official part and who hasn't. And this is a problem that is greatly solved by Onshape. As a teacher, when I heard about this feature, I immediately thought of my class, because then we could create activities that were much more interactive. And an FRC team is the same thing. I might be able to have the team work on 5 different parts of the robot at the same time. And maybe we'll look at a few possibilities about that as we proceed through our session this morning. Okay, so we can, in the Onshape interface, here are 3 different views that we may use. This may not be all of them. The first is a sketch. This is a 2D drawing, and you can see on this little graphic here, there's a sketch button. If I want to make a sketch, I press this button. And first I have to select a plane on which to do the sketch. And you can see here in this drawing, this particular plane has been selected. There are 3 planes, the XY, the XZ, and the YZ plane to begin with. And then you can also, for example, here is a plane that's on an oblique angle. It's part of this part. I could also make a sketch on that part if I really wanted to. So as long as I can find a flat surface and select it, it will become highlighted. And then I can draw a sketch on that surface. And we'll see that in our interaction. The next thing you may want to do, say we have this part and we want someone to manufacture it for us, then we could create a drawing. And a drawing, you can see on the tab down here, here's the corner bracket drawing. And if I click on that tab, we'll get to that drawing. And then I also may want to assemble this corner bracket with other pieces. And then you see there's a tab at the bottom for assembly. So I can make a part, I can make a drawing of the part, and I can assemble that part with other parts in an assembly. As I make parts, and these are separate physical entities in our Onshape, they start to become listed in our parts list here. And then I can sort of select them and reorient them in the assemblies to demonstrate how the parts fit together. So that's a little bit about our Onshape interface. We create a sketch, we may make a drawing of the sketch, and we make an assembly. For each of these, there's a toolbar, and that appears at the top of the screen. So if I go into a drawing context, we'll have some drawing tools. And if I go into an assembly context, the same thing. And when I'm in my sketch, the sketch tools appear up here. So the toolbar changes according to the context. And then once I have a drawing or a sketch or an assembly made, I can also add features to that particular item using the toolbar. So for example, when I have a 3D part, such as this, and I want to sort of dull down this edge here and make it slightly less sharp, I can make a chamfer or a fillet or something, and that will round out the edges, for example. That's one thing that I may do. So we can take a look at that, how that looks in Onshape. I'll escape this full screen here, and we'll take a look at our Onshape interface. You may feel free to sort of follow along in your Onshape or save this for later. So here we are. Here's my Onshape account. And you can see here's some more parts of my 3D printer. that I've made. The 3D printer requires several of these aluminum linear rails. And so I've started to work with them in my CAD. Now, how did I get to these rails? What did I do? And we will take a look at how I made those rails. But let's step back for a moment and go to the very top left corner. I've just clicked on this top left button, and it brings me to my so-called home page. And you can see the various projects that we have worked on. Paul and I were involved in building an EveryBot back in February. So we have imported the EveryBot here. And there is in here a access or the access to the EveryBot, for example. And I can go in here and start working on my EveryBot. If it imported correctly. I know that we tried to import it and maybe it didn't go so well. There's a few versions of it here. I have the EveryBot in some other places here we can look at. I tried to import some drawings for our various FRC events. So I was experimenting with Onshape earlier on in the season. And then you can see some of the things I've been working on here. Here's a corner bracket for my 3D printer. I'm going to go to this one first and just show a little bit about the interface. So when I want to begin making a part like this, let's retrace the steps that I did to be able to do that. First of all, I selected a plane. I typically imagine the desktop. So I take the top plane, as it's called. And you see I just right-clicked it. And here we are. I've selected it. Now, if I want to do something like making a sketch, I can click that button. And I'm going to be able to create a sketch on that plane. Well, I will now reorient my view using this viewfinder tool in the top right corner. And you see top, front, and right. If I click on one of them, now I'm looking directly down on the top. So I could actually make a new part here with a sketch. And since I'm in a sketch, and I see that here, I can do some various things with the sketch. For example, draw a line. I can make a box or a rectangle. I can do a circle here. And I can do an arc with 3 points. I clicked in the beginning point, there's the second point, and then I click once, and this is all with the left button. And then I'm making my arc by dragging. If I have the right size for my arc, I can click once again, the left button. And I've made these various sketches. So this is something you may want to just play around with. You click somewhere with the left button, and then you can drag. And I let go of my drag, then I can move my mouse around to determine how many sides my shape will have. I'm just dragging the mouse without even clicking anything at the moment. Let's settle on 7. You can see there's a little 7 there. There's a 7-sided figure in my sketch. And then I have something called a spline, which makes nice smooth curves. As I click, it sets some anchor points. And as I drag around, it affects the exact shape of the line before that point. So there's a little bit of math involved in that, but luckily we don't have to know that. We just make it all work together. There, I've made a spline. Oh, look at this. The spline has intersected with my rectangle. I can use some of the tools over here to trim that down. I don't want this rectangle here. Let's just click it and remove it. Just clicking again with my left button. And we can take that off. So now I have an irregular shape. And I can trim various things. I don't want that circle. Okay, I'll just trim it. How about that line? We can tell it to go away. And for example, we have now erased the various parts of our shapes. Oh, look at this. I can do one at a time. What if I go in the center one here? Does it trim? No, it doesn't, but I can continue trimming these ones here and erase everything. So there I have some drawing tools, and then in my sketch, these are the sort of tools to modify my sketch. I'm not going to get into these too much at the moment, but I can mirror or create a linear pattern, or I can insert an existing drawing into my sketch and so on. And now you see some of these tools also have a drop-down menu. I can make a corner rectangle or a center point rectangle, and that just determines how the shape is formed with my mouse. I can also align the rectangle at a certain angle. So you can explore these drop-downs. It can be a circle you're making with starting at a center point, or a 3-point circle if you're a math person, or an ellipse if you really just like different shapes. And same with our arcs and our polygons and our splines that are different options that you may use to make your 2D sketches. All right, I'm going to sort of maybe select everything here and erase it all, delete it all here. And, there, I got rid of one set of things, but now I have my closed loop. If you look here, let's say I erase this one, it's no longer shaded. But if I go back and you see, without clicking my mouse button, I'm just dragging here, it's highlighting it. Now I'll click my left mouse button and I may join it. There we are. If I click it and they join, then it will shade it. That indicates to me there's a closed loop. But this does not always happen. I'm going to press Control Z, and that undoes my most recent work. I'll try that again. And I got close there, but let's pretend I wasn't quite seeing what I was doing, and I leave it there. And you see, I want to stop using my tool. I'm just going to hit Escape. And now you see I've not made a closed loop and it has not shaded it. So what may I do? This is the point at which we may start adding constraints to our drawing. So we create the shape of our drawing. We modify it a little with sort of overall modifications, but then we sort of lock our drawing down to a specific design and dimension using our dimensions and constraints here. So this first constraint that comes up is called coincident. And you see here, these two dots I had meant to make the same point. So I'm just scrolling in here with my mouse wheel. It is very useful to have a mouse wheel on your mouse when you're doing CAD, just as a sort of aside here. I'm going to create a coincident sort of point. And I clicked the 2 points and there they join together. We should try that again. I click the tool coincident. Then the next 2 points that I collect will become the same point. There we are. And we see that I've made a completely closed sort of loop. So that is my drawing. Now I'm kind of getting in the way of my 3D part here. So I'm not going to keep this sketch. What I will do is, first of all, I'll just accept the sketch. Now it's a sketch on my model and I look at it in 3D. Now I'm using my right mouse button. Using the right mouse button, when I move the mouse around, then it shifts my view. And I can also just simply use this tool here to get different views in my shape, or just the right mouse button. And you see a bunch of points that are left over from my polygon and my shape here. I really don't want to keep this sketch though, because it's interfering with my existing component. So I'm just going to right-click. Right-clicking on an object in Onshape gives you a context menu. And there are a number of options here. Well, I'm just going to delete it. And there goes my sketch. It's gone. Let's go into this part now and see what was the work process to generate it. So first of all, when I hover over these various features, you can see the different things that were happening to make my component. They get highlighted as I go. So no doubt, oh, I just scrolled to the top here. I started with a single sketch. Let's look at that sketch. And I started with a rectangle. And now you can see that I have some dimensions on here. When you make a sketch, you want to constrain it. I started at the origin point there. You can see that point is on the origin between the X and Y axes, the intersection point. And I made a 20 millimeter by 15 millimeter component, which corresponds to an actual component I have here in my 3D printing drawer. So how did I make these constraints? Well, looking at this drop-down menu, there are a number of constraints that we may apply to any of our pieces. We may do a coincident constraint, as we've seen. We can make two circles concentric to share the same center point. We can make two lines parallel. We can make two lines tangent. We can hold a line horizontal or vertical, and so on. You see several other of these constraints here, each of which may be applied to a drawing. What you want to do with a drawing is to specify it exactly as it should be. So there's no way to misinterpret or double interpret the geometry that you have specified. So you want to constrain it just enough, but not too much. You don't want to over constrain it so you get contradictions. These two lines, for example, cannot be parallel, and this one at a different angle than this one, for example. That would be a contradiction. So I applied these constraints much like this. I click a line there. It's now selected with my left button, and then I can actually specify something about it. I can insist that it be horizontal or vertical using this button. I'm not going to do that at the moment. Wonder what would happen if I try that. You see, it's issuing a contradiction because it already had assumed that one of the other lines was a different angle. So that produces a contradiction, and you see there are some error marks here. If you get these, you can realize that you've tried to tell the CAD to do two things at once that are not mutually available to do at the same time. And it gives you this message, sketch could not be solved. So how do I rectify that? I'm just going to Control Z and undo my previous work. All right, so it would be a good idea perhaps to start a new document, and I'm just going to use a few features to make a closed loop and then apply a few constraints. And at any time, if you have a question, you may continue to ask questions. So what I did, I made a sketch and then I extruded it. If I take a look here, here's an extrusion of my sketch to a depth of 2 millimeter. Oh, that one was actually not applied, I suppose. And let's see this one. Here's my actual 2 millimeter extrusion. The first one was not actually being applied to an actual sketch. The extrusion 2 was on this sketch 1. And you see I made a 2 millimeter base for the bottom of my component. Then I made another sketch. And you see here, I can look at the top. And, oh, it looks like there's some errors I have there. It still let me have them. Oh, no, those are just constraints, aren't they? So sorry. Is that an error? Sketch could not be solved. Yes, I have an error in here. So I may have to delete some of these to find out what is being contradictory in here. I could click one and delete it, for example, and continue deleting the constraints until I don't have a contradiction anymore. And so you see, I specified some lines there on that sketch. And then in my extrude 3, you can see what I did. I extruded it out into 3 dimensions. And then in my sketch 4, what happened? Did I use sketch 4? I'm not sure. Maybe I used sketch 5. Oh yeah, you see here, I made a oblique sketch. And then my extrude 4, I extruded through it to take away some of that material. And there you see there, I used a Boolean operation to cancel the parts of this one piece here, which is a rectangular region at an oblique angle. And take away the parts that are overlapping my main model. And so after the Boolean is applied, it cuts that out. And so what I'm getting at here, you make a sketch in 2D, you extrude it. Then you may make another sketch on that item or separately, and then you may extrude that. And then at a certain point, several of your objects may intersect using Boolean operations, and the intersection may be kept or cast away depending on what you want. And through this repetitive process, you gradually build up parts. And you also get a sense over time as to how to best build up the parts using a reasonable number of operations and keeping it nice and clean. You get an intuition for that over time. And I'm sure engineers go through a lot of sort of pondering on how to interact with their CAD software so as to not overwhelm the CAD software with complicated operations, keeping it simple where possible. So you see here, I extruded everything up to this point. I could have thought ahead, for example, and made this hole in my original drawing, but I didn't. So maybe that's not good practice because I had to draw these holes one by one and then extrude them and make the holes there. So you see this whole process unfolding to get my final part. And I did a few more things, finally arriving at my component as it is right now. And you can see I was drawing a sketch on the side just to play around with it and see what I might do with some additional modifications on the part. All right, so just mindful of our timing here. Most happy to hear any questions you may have and double checking if there are any other people in the waiting room. No. Okay, so there is Onshape. I've sort of given an overall view of how to use Onshape to build up a part using this example part. And we've gone through some of these main features here. One thing I really have got in the habit of doing with a new piece of software, it's always nice to know the keyboard shortcuts. And there's a list that pops up in Onshape if you do a shift and a question mark. And we can go back to our Onshape here. If I do shift and question mark, there's my list of keyboard shortcuts. And you can already see I was using Control Z. Oh yeah, if you have a Mac, you don't use Control, you use that strange Mac control button. And there's a Control Y, redo and delete. Whatever you selected will go away. And spacebar, it clears things. And as you see, there are lots of ways to do your work quickly and efficiently. If you don't have a mouse, then you can see the 3D view can be modified with some of these buttons here. Shift Z, that would be interesting to see. Shift Z, let's try that. Shift and Z. Oh yeah, now it just zooms in every time I press Shift Z. And then how do I zoom out? Well, I'll just do shift and question mark and say that zoom out is just Z. Okay, so I'll just press Z. And there we are, we zoom out. So that's great. It's really great to play around with these keyboard shortcuts. And I find that they save an awful lot of time over time as you get to know them. All right, so there are a few things to remember about Onshape. We'll go back to our presentation here. Version control, I've already spoken of a little bit, and Teams, of course, have been exposed to GitHub as it's sponsored for Teams, and you're able to create a team doing your computer code with version control, GitHub or GitLab or whichever one you want to use. And the same thing here goes for Onshape. You can see different branches where people are branching off of specific versions of a item to be able to work on them. And so that's something you can learn over time and make branches of your work and see how that all enables your team to do much better collaboration without stepping on each other's toes, so to speak. Okay, we've seen a little bit about sketches and constraints. Now it might be nice to revise or just focus in a little bit more about sketches and constraints. And I'm remembering those who are considering pedagogy for Onshape. Here's a sort of an overall view of what a sketch and a constraint is. We will choose a plane, as we saw there, and start a sketch, and then make a drawing. And so actually I'm have to be very careful with the vocabulary I use here, because a drawing is a specific word for a engineering drawing of the part that you're making. But in this context here, in the sketch, basically you're making a sketch. You create the lines that make up your two-dimensional object. And then you constrain that sketch. I shouldn't use the word drawing again. You constrain the sketch with dimensions, angles, and geometric features. In fact, maybe I will just, I'm just going to change that so it doesn't sort of become confusing later. So just a little modification there may help us to avoid confusion later. So we're going to make the sketch with lines and curves, etc., and then we'll constrain the sketch with dimensions, angles, and geometric features. And we've seen a little introduction to that. Here's a sketch on the side of my component, for example. Now, let's focus in on sketches. And as you've seen, we've gone through the line, polyline, circle, arc, spline, and polygon very briefly, and shown that some of these have drop-down menus to give you specific functionality. And then here we have a closed loop, or that was what was intended to be a closed loop. As you see, it's not shaded. So somewhere along the way, and if you look very closely here, it's not shaded, because those 2 points are not coincident. There's a point that's almost there. It looks like it closes the loop, but if we were to zoom in, you would see that it doesn't. So let's make a sketch like this, put a few constraints on it, make it closed, and then make an extrusion. I think that's one of the core operations in CAD. Back to our Onshape here. So here is an object. I'm going to go right back to my main menu and create a brand new sketch, or document rather. A document contains our sketches and extrusions. Sample part. Okay. And there's a blank document with my main branch of versioning and 3 planes to choose to begin with. I'm choosing my desktop plane, and I will orient my view to the top. There I am, and I may begin my sketch. I'm using my left button for most of my basic selections here. Okay, so now using my left button again, I may make some lines. And since I'm in the line tool and I click my left button to confirm the location of a point, it continues in the line tool. Well, what if I'm done with it? Escape gets me out of my current tool in Onshape. Now let's take another sort of tool here. Here's an arc tool. As you see, it's highlighting this. So that means it's going to start at that point, and I'll make an arc. There's an arc. And I click again with my left button, continuing to click. And there I made a little arc, and we'll finish it off with some splines. Here's one here. Okay, since I don't want any more lines, I'm going to escape. Oh, and I got it right the first time. It shaded it for me. That means it's a closed loop. So there's my shape. Don't know what it is at the moment because I'm just sort of showing the various features, how they can work together. Now I'm going to constrain a few parts of my shape. Let's go to my constraint tools here. Well, one thing I can do, let's insist that one of these lines is vertical, this one here. Good. I just constrained it as vertical. Oh, there it is. It should be vertical now. It's showing the constraints. There. If I show constraints, it can show me what it's already assuming about my objects. And coincident, you see those lines there are those points there are coincident. That's why you see these coincidence indicators there. That one's vertical. Let's make these two ones perpendicular. Okay, so go to my perpendicular. Now I'm in the perpendicular tool. You see it's showed here. The next two lines I click should end up being perpendicular. Good. And since the rest of my drawing is not constrained, then it shifts the shape of everything else to maintain the closed loop and the constraints that I already have. Now this circle here, maybe I need it to be a certain radius. So I can go to these dimensions here. There's a dimension constraint. Clicked on this radius, there it is 25.4, but maybe I don't want it to be 25.4. I click again with the left button. Let's say it's 30. Oops, there we are. It made it 30. Since nothing else is specified for dimensions, then my entire sketch just got bigger. But now what about this one here? I have not specified any other dimensions except for this radius. What if I try to specify this radius? At the moment it's 30. I click here and let's try making that 25. Will it still be able to do that? Yes, it just shortened the line to achieve that 25. And finally here, one thing I can do, you see here from this line to this line, it looks for the moment like this is just tangent to this one and it just has the same angle. But if I were to drag something, I'm just going to escape out of my tools and take a point. Once I'm out of the tools, I can drag around points with my left button. And you see how that's constrained to be vertical. No matter what I do, the left or the rightmost line continues to be vertical. And those two lines also continue to be perpendicular. Let's move around this line for the moment. Will it let me? It's not letting me drag this one. How about this one? Some of them are already constrained and cannot move. But this one can move around using the spline. It changes that shape. But maybe I want two particular lines to be tangent, meaning they have the same angle at the point of contact, or that a circle touches a line at a single point. So let me click this one and this one. Does that work? There we are. Now, with a line joining a curve, it creates the same angle at that point. And now you see it kind of inverted the angle just to solve that one. Maybe I can uninvert it by dragging some of these around again. Escape out of that, and I can drag things around. Can I drag this one now? At certain point, you can no longer drag certain parts of your drawing because they're constrained. All right, so there I've completed a drawing there. I can zoom in and out with my mouse wheel or my Z or Shift Z to zoom in and out. Okay, finish my sketch. Let's complete the sketch with this check mark. And now I see my sketch there and I have a 2D sketch and I'm using my right mouse button to scroll around here. Let us extrude to create a 3D shape. By default, it's coming up with 25 millimeters. Let's just say it's 20 millimeter extrusion. And when I click this check mark here, if all goes well, nothing happened. And you can see that's what happened before when I was playing around with the other things. I did not have my sketch selected. So I'm just going to delete this with a right click and delete. So let's select this sketch and now we extrude. You see right away it extrudes. So we'll put in a 20 for the 20 millimeters and you see a 20 millimeter extrusion has happened. There we are. I have my shape. My right mouse button holding down, I can just sort of swivel around in my 3D view to take a look at my 3D shape. So now to illustrate the process of doing CAD, you can do a series of sketches and extrusions to build up a certain shape. Let's say that I'm going to make an additional set of features on here. So I'll click this surface and make a new sketch. Now I will be sketching on top of that surface, and I'll click my top view. Let's put something on here. There, a 5-sided figure. Escape out of that, I'll drag it around to where I want it to go. Oh, there we are. Dragged it around, sized it up a little, and there's my 5-sided figure. Okay, so this one, I'm done with that sketch for the moment. I can do all kinds of other features there if I like. I'm going to extrude again. So one must remember to select something. So there's my sketch 2. I selected it. Let's see if the extrusion will work. There, I extruded my piece, and there's a 5-sided figure coming out of the side of my part. So if I'm satisfied with that, however much I want to extrude, let's say it's a 2mm extrusion. There, it's just a slight feature on the surface, and there we are. A 5-sided figure is now on this. Let's try again. I'm going to select that same plane and make a new sketch and go to the top view just to make sure everything's fine. This time I'm going to put maybe some kind of feature on here with a few lines. There, I put a triangle, an irregular triangle of some sort, and I'm finished with that. But now let's select it and we'll do another operation with it. So now that it's selected, I'm going to do the extrude, but you see there are a few other features here. I can extrude blindly into the air. I can go up to a next feature or up to a phase. So there are various things I can do in my assemblies with different parts to extrude a certain amount, or I can just blindly extrude a certain amount of distance. I can remove the feature. So now it's extruding backwards. Essentially, it's making a hole. So I just extruded backwards. That is more than enough to go right through my shape. And when I'm finished, now I have a hole. And now you can see this iterative process of making a sketch, extruding it, and then making another sketch and extruding it to create features and holes on your 3D parts. And all the while, I can constrain anything that I have done. For example, this, I didn't specify any dimensions. Well, I can go back to my sketch of this feature here, and let's put a dimension on this part right here. So at the moment, that's 13. Let's make that 15. See what happens. There, it's still inside my shape. I could even make it bigger and it will come right out the side. That's okay. It will still be working like that. So going to this dimension here. Well, I can specify the angle here. Don't want to do that at the moment. I was pressing the wrong button. It's trying to escape. There we go. Let's go into this one here. And let's say if we did this 20, it will make it so big, it comes right out of the feature. Well, let's see what that looks like. It's going to update everything we did. And now you see, it just makes a shelf that hangs over the part. Oh, how did I get that in the center? I'm just holding down my mouse wheel. I could also figure out how to do that with my keyboard, Shift and question mark, and I can do all kinds of things with my 3D view to move it around. Pan, Control, Shift, and my arrow keys. Let's try that. Escape out of here, Control and Shift, and here's my arrow keys. So I don't need my mouse necessarily because I can alternatively use my keyboard to pan around with my Control, Shift, and arrow keys. All right, so that's why this CAD program is very nice. Many other CAD programs allow this modification of dimensions and features after the fact. Some of them don't, though. So it is good to know this in Onshape. If you want to come back to any feature that you've already worked with, you can do some further modifications. So for example, here's my triangle. I can select a part of the triangle and maybe put a dimension on it. Here we are. Right now that's 44 millimeters. Let's just make that 40. There we are. It's a little smaller. And this one, it says 25. Let's make that 30. There we are, and done. And now my feature accordingly has updated. So I have a feeling my time is going pretty quickly. Let's just take a pause for a moment. If there are any questions, please feel free to speak up. Go back here to our slideshow. And we've taken a little look at sketches, how to use the various features of sketches, and how to put some constraints on the features, hopefully to get our basics going. Taking a look at our time. Oh, we have some more time available here for additional sort of building up of parts. So I think here it would be nice for everyone to take a little time to try some sketches and constraints, to ask some questions. And meanwhile, I'll make a few more of these sketches and constraints and build up a few parts, or at least build up the skills required to make certain parts. So I'm going to just go back here to the Onshape. And I've got this part as I want it at the moment. We will maybe go and look at another part that has already been done. So our linear rail, double click on here, and let's see, how did this linear rail come about? It's actually fairly straightforward. We created one rail and then several can be copied from that one part. It all started from a single sketch and it was on the front plane. So I can go to my front plane and then take a look at that sketch. And you can see I put a lot of constraints on here. Maybe I over constrained it. This was my sort of practice with the Onshape interface, getting to specify sort of dimensions on my sketches. So what I've done, it's a 20 millimeter rail. So it's a square cross section with a 20 millimeter square size. And then each part has a feature taken out of it. Now, I have done this kind of the hard way. Maybe there's a way that we could do this a little bit easier. As you see, I drew all of this all at once because I was just getting used to the Onshape interface. But you see, I've repeated something here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anytime you repeat something in computer science or in life in general, there may be a way to automate it. So what I may try to do is make another linear rail like this, make one feature, and then see if I can repeat that feature and rotate it about 360 degrees with 4 copies. So that would be a sort of good thing to do to sort of cut down on my CAD time. I didn't mind this here because I was just getting to know my Onshape. So let's go to a new document and try exactly that. I'm going to create a new document here and try symmetry, or what shall we call it? Try repetitive tasks. So I'm going to try some linear and or rotational sort of repetition. Go to my plane, my desktop plane that is, and let's start with a sketch. We're going to make a box here. I start with my origin, make approximately, that's not exactly a square, but that's okay because we're going to do some constraints here. My first one here, we will constrain with a dimension to 20 millimeters. And I can put a constraint here to 20 millimeters. There we are. Okay, now I can start drawing this feature here. It starts on the line, does something like this. I'm kind of being a little bit easygoing as I make my sketch. It's very approximate because I can constrain it now. For example, that's kind of off, but I want it to be vertical. So I'll just click on this one. Now it's vertical. This one also should be vertical. And then there's my equal constraint. I want this one to be equal to this one. And I want this one to be equal to that one. There we go. I think I can probably, oh, that's still the whole line there. I can constrain the horizontal and vertical distances of my points as well. This one here, I can specify its dimension. Let's say that this one is going to be 5 millimeters. There we are. And then how far above this line is this point here? Let's just guess. I'll take these two features here and click them. I clicked a point and a line, and I can specify the vertical distance between them. Let's say 6 millimeters. There we are. And then I take this line. Oh, whoops. Let's try this again. Here's a point, and here's a line. And then specifying my vertical distance between them. Oh, that's why I have something selected. Now, unselected, try that again. A point and a line. There we are. And that's 11, but I want that to be 6. There we are. So gradually I have started to specify the dimensions here. Maybe make this 4, make that a little shorter. There we go. And actually, it's looking a little too wide. I'm just going to make that maybe 7. And this one 7. Just click them and go back. I'm double clicked that. There, I made it a little narrower there. There's my feature. So let's see if I can do some rotational symmetry. I'm going to have a point of intersection somewhere around here. I wonder if I can add a point. There's a point. I'll just go put a point right here. And I can specify my horizontal and vertical distances from my point. I'm going to try to use that as a point of rotation. So let's see, I will specify this distance here. Now, by default, it's coming out as a line on the slope of the 2 points. But if I drag my mouse around, it's going to start doing the horizontal or vertical distance between them. So it's saying 9, it should be exactly 10. I want that in the center of the rectangle. Click 2 points again. I'm holding down Shift to select the both points there. And there we go, 10. There's my center point. Now I should be able to do some kind of rotational sort of symmetry going on here. Let's see what we call this, or what we can do. Linear pattern or mirror. What about a circular pattern? So it's going for a circular pattern. First, I may select the items I want to be in the circular pattern, but then I may drag this to right here. Good, I dragged that there, but I don't want it 3 times, I want it 4 times. There we are. And you see, I forgot to select 2 of those. I wonder if it lets me select them before I make that. Yes. I even selected them there. Now it has all the pieces I want to include. And if I hit, you see there's a little check mark on my mouse, click it one more time, and it does that. It did all the features with a rotational pattern. And now I can kind of clean this up with a little trim. There's my scissors. I'll just trim these bits here because they're outside of my linear rail. Now, of course, I haven't actually checked the dimensions here. I was just doing a quick kind of approximation of our linear rail. But you see how very quickly we can get a linear rail. This time, I don't have as many constraints on it because I've only specified one of the features and then copied it exactly 4 times. And that's a little bit better for the CAD process. So since I'm done with my sketch, I know that I will need a 400 millimeter piece of linear rail for my 3D printer. So let's extrude that. And we'll type in 400 millimeters here. There we are. And when I'm done, it looks like nothing's happened until I rotate. And there you see a 400 millimeter linear rail, which will be used for a 3D printer. Great. Okay, that's sort of one thing that we might do. I've used a rotational pattern. I could also use a linear pattern. What if I have a metal bar and I need some regular holes all along that metal bar? Let's try that. And then we'll make that bar a little bit fancy. So we'll try this, create a new document, and we'll call this one linear pattern. And we can also features. We can look at a few of the features. All right, so let's say we want a bar with a linear pattern on it. I'll choose my top. And we can make a rectangle. Through a sketch. This time, just making sort of a lengthy bar. Don't really care at the moment how long or wide is the bar, just making it a certain amount. And we'll say okay. And then we make that into an extrusion, make sure it's selected, and then we extrude it. And we'll say 5 millimeters. There we have some kind of bar. Now, through our repetitive process, we're going to put a hole in this with a sketch. So I select the plane on which I want to create a hole, make a new sketch. And the top view is really helpful here. I'll put a single circle right here in my bar. There we are. Escape to stop that tool. And that's all I need for this sketch. And I will take the second sketch and then make an extrusion. So where is this extrusion? We will see here. I may actually have to make that linear pattern in my sketch. Let's just go back here. So I've selected my sketch feature, that's the circle. Let's try to make the linear pattern first before we extrude it. So I've got a circular pattern selected. Let's go back to linear pattern. Oh, you see right now you can intuitively see I want to repeat it 3 times with a 25 millimeter separation. Let's make that 20. And I'll have them repeat, let's say, 10 times. Maybe I could fit 11 or 12 on there. Let's try 12. Pretty close. There we are. Now I've got 12 features done nicely. I can drag them around to kind of center. I could also constrain them to be exactly centered. There we are. There's my linear feature. And I'll say done. Okay, I can take that sketch now and extrude them all at once. And right now that extrudes out, but I want to create holes in the object. I've gone further than I have to. I wonder what happens if I do exactly 5. Still has them as holes, but what if I make it as 4.9? Not quite enough because it doesn't go all the way through. So once I go exactly to the thickness of that object, it creates a hole. But anywhere less, then it will not be a hole. There's my bar with a linear pattern done in it. So that really helps. Okay, so there are different things you can do to your pieces to aesthetically modify them. And we see that in some of these features here. And I will take a look at a few of them. First of all, I'm just going to do the fillet and the chamfer. You can play around with some of the other ones. Oh yeah, and there's some mirror features and things like this. Let's just take a look at the fillet. If I choose, for example, one side of my bar, let's fillet it. And we'll say that the fillet is a certain amount. You see, it's cutting it off a little. Each edge is kind of sliced off. I'm going to make it just a 1 millimeter fillet. And you can see a kind of a rounding on the bar here. There we go. There, I filleted the edge. And let's see if that allows me to do that on a single edge. So I just clicked this edge and I'm going to try a single fillet. Let's try this one 2 millimeters if it will let me. Yeah, it does. So I took off 2 millimeters on that edge, and then you see my next fillet. There's a 2 millimeter edge there. Let's try on this other edge here. Click it with my left button. And I will try a chamfer this time. That's a straight edge coming out, and we'll try a 2 millimeter chamfer. Maybe it's chamfer. Some people might see that. Did it work? It's not quite working now, is it? Let's try that again. So you see, it only allows the dimensions that are possible given the current setup. So it's only allowing me, it didn't allow me 2, but it allowed me a 1 millimeter chamfer, which is a straight line cut out of it. You can see in the profile here, that's a straight line. And then the other one is a curved line. That's the difference between the fillet and the chamfer. We can do these with 2-dimensional objects as much as we can do them with 3-dimensional objects. So those are some of the modifications then that you can do in your CAD to sort of give a nice sort of rounded and polished sort of feature or look and feel to your parts. Here we have, I've selected a circle. What will it allow me to do? There, I tried a chamfer, that worked. Try this circle, select this one, and we'll try, oh, it allowed for 2 chamfers there. Okay, I forgot to come out of the feature. Now I'm going to select a few others. Holding down Shift, I can select a few features here, and let's just make those fillets. There, so you see some of them are straight edged and some of them are rounded. And I can do this all throughout my model. One thing that can happen is sometimes where a curve meets a line or different features intersect, it may not allow you to do a chamfer or a fillet on the whole piece. You might have to do it one part at a time or carefully consider how you're going to do those features. There are some more advanced features that we can do, drafts and ribs and all of these things, and you can play around with them. The Onshape documentation has a lot of help that you may want to sort of understand through the Learning Center here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to know, well, what is a rib? Okay, let's just go to the Learning Center. And I should be able to find out from here some more information about that. But I can also just try this. There we are, rib Onshape. And I expand here. There's a video example that shows me about how to do a rib. And it shows me the steps to doing that. Oh, that's interesting. So based on the sketch, I brought a rib into the feature. So we're going to make a sketch and then make that into a rib, and then that's how it's kind of working. So I've actually not used the rib before, but if I did want to use it, I could try the video example and then try the examples there. Okay, so that's the rib. Back here for a little take at where we're at. We're still working on our sketches and constraints. And you can see I've been working with sketches and constraints, and in this case, features. So we can maybe take some time to just review a few of the things that are happening here in our Onshape learning process. Just a question here. Does everyone have access to Onshape right now? And is everyone able to sort of follow along? Maybe it might be a time for you to make a sketch and apply some constraints and or extrusions to your sketch. We could have someone else share their screen if they have a different way of doing some of these tricks, or to share their screen to get some help doing a new feature. We can just use this time a little bit interactively if you like. It's all up to the participants here. You can also use the chat if you have a particular comment, question to add to the discussion as we are going. Just checking the chat here. And so we have a kind of a quiet group at the moment. That's quite fine. We may sort of continue. So as we are mostly focused on sketches and constraints right now, I did go a little bit into extrusions and parts and features. I'm going to just sort of recap the sketches and constraints in the next few minutes. And that will bring us to our 15-minute break. All right, so let's review the process in Onshape of creating a sketch. So I'm thinking here of maybe making another component for my 3D printer, for example. I'm going to go to my top left-hand corner to start into my menu. And there's my library of parts already made. I'll create a new document. And in this one, I'm going to call Z-axis bracket. As in my 3D printer, I have a Z-axis bracket that needs to be made. Okay, and now I'm selecting my desktop plane with my left button and choose the top view. So I'm looking straight down upon my desktop and create a sketch. This particular feature will just have some rectangles and some circles. Start with my origin and put this up here, just like this. And if I recall correctly, this piece has about a certain dimension of width and length that I will specify using my dimension tool. Here is the first dimension. It says 71 millimeters. I think that's kind of close. We'll say 80 millimeters for this. And here, this is going to be about 50 millimeters. There we are. So there's the basic rectangular shape, and there will be several holes in this 3D component. So I'm going to put one big one. This is for the motor to be mounted on. There are going to be 4 circles here for the 3 millimeter screws. You'll notice I'm not being very careful. I'm just putting them approximately the size they need to be and approximately the location. I'm going to constrain it later. And then there will be 2 holes here to attach it to the 3D printer frame. So these 2 holes will attach to that linear rail. And these holes will have a stepper motor attached to them. So I've done quite a messy job there, but that's quite okay because I'm going to use constraints to tidy up these circles. So if I recall correctly, I believe this one should have something like a 30 millimeter diameter. So I'm going to constrain it as such. My dimension clicked on a circle will get me my diameter. And look at that, I'm pretty close to 30 already. We'll just say 30. Good. And this line should be in the center, 25 millimeters above and 25 millimeters from the side. So I can do that by clicking this line and then this, maybe I'll start with this dot and then this line. There we are. Try that again. There's my dimension tool. Okay. Wow, it already is exactly 25. That's not too bad. And let's see if we can get that going from here to here. Make that 25. Great. So there, now the hole for the stepper motor is there. Now there are 4 3 millimeter screws that attach the stepper motor. And so I'm going to constrain each one of them with a dimension of 3 millimeters. And that's the diameter. And as you see, each one of these should be perfectly placed around. And in fact, from this point here, it should be 11.5 millimeters left and up, or sideways and up or down. So we'll try to do those constraints now. So one way I can do that is to take these 2 points here, holding down shift between them, and I believe that should be 11. There we are. That might be a little short, possibly. Maybe it has to be more. Trying to recall there. It looks like about, maybe it's like more like 15. Not being precise at the moment because I can change all of these. There we are. So horizontally, there's a distance of 15. And then vertically, there should be about the same, 15. Good. Now, from this one to this one, I could also put the constraints from here. Another way I could do it, I could insist that these 2 points, holding down shift, have a vertical distance between them of 0. Zero, enter. Oops, there we are. Now they're level. And you can see here, this line length should be a little bit longer. So let me hold down shift and select these 2 parts here. And the distance between those should be 30. There we are. And so on, I can continue going around my object and constraining it so that these points are centering around this hole. Now this point and this point should be vertically aligned. So I'm going to maybe try a vertical constraint. This may not be the exact way that you're doing the CAD. You can probably think of a more efficient and or better way to do it. What I'm just demonstrating is the various constraints that we can place on things. It looks like it's not allowing me to make this vertical. I suppose that's only for lines, but that's okay. I'm going to make a horizontal distance between them. Hold down shift, select the 2 points, and make the horizontal distance 0. There we are. Now that point's aligned, and I can make the length of this line. Oops. Hold on this one and this one. Make it 30 again. There now the, oops, it didn't quite catch, so type in 30 and enter. There we are. One more point to constrain. I'll make the or the vertical distance between these 2 points is 0. Trying this out here, that's 0 there, and an enter. Didn't catch, so that's okay. Try that one more time. There we are. And you see that distance there is a little bit too much, but if I make this a distance up to 30 only, now I should have these 4 holes centered about this central hole here. This is where your knowledge of mathematics and geometry comes into play, and you don't want to over constrain it. If I've done everything correctly, this line should already be 30 millimeters. If I try to over constrain it, it may give me a problem now. Like, for example, it is 30. So now I've done my work correctly because it came out to 30 without me telling it directly. I did it indirectly. What if I try to make that 45 now? Oh, it gives me a red error. No, that's no good. So it actually has to be 30. I over constrained it there. I did Control Z to undo it. Okay, so now there are only 2 more holes. I'm going to specify the dimension of these holes. Just remember my dimension tool. First of all, they'll be vertically aligned with a 0 millimeter difference so that there's a vertical between them. And they should be about the same distance away from the center line. So let's make whatever this distance is, that's 17. I'll just call that 15. And maybe I can make the length of this line 30 then. This is arbitrary. These are just 2 screw holes to hold the component on the linear rail. So the exact location doesn't matter. Now their dimension, they should probably be about 5 millimeter holes. So we'll just put a 5 here. There we are. They're going to hold 2 screws. The 2 screws are going to hold this component on the 3D printer. Okay, so now you've seen I've done a lot of constraints and my sketch is done. When I click yes, finished, I may select my sketch and make a 3D extrusion to create my part. There we have my part, and this particular 3D printer has a 5 millimeter sort of thickness for these parts. And there's my 3D printed part to make a new 3D printer. Okay, so that's the kind of process that we will go through in FRC to make custom parts for our robots as well. It's bringing us to 10:30. I think we'll take about a 15-minute break and reconvene at 10:45. In the meantime, if you have questions, you may type them in the chat, and please feel free to speak up at any time. I'm just going to pause the recording. Please remind me to continue the recording for the second half. And we'll take our little break.